What is up? Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day. Back with some more Resident Evil Remake, the original remake. And today I'm going to be talking about an enemy in which I believe is honestly the most underrated and underappreciated enemy in all of Resident Evil. Now, I asked this question a few days ago in one of my posts, and most of the responses were basically talking about Lisa Trevor, which I would not deny. Lisa Trevor is definitely awesome, no question about it. But I don't feel like in terms of, well, I guess you could say she is underrated. She's probably one of the greatest lore-based enemies in terms of the whole story behind her. But in terms of just being completely forgotten, never talked about, I feel like this enemy, which also appears in Resident Evil Remake, is way more underrated because I never hear anyone talk about them. I never hear them mentioned or brought up. We usually hear all the same enemy types, and there are a few that go under the radar. But this one, criminally under the radar, because it's not necessarily what this enemy does that makes it underrated or why I like it so much. It's a concept behind it. A concept of which spawns one or creates it, which happens real time in the game. And that's something that we really don't see at all. And I think the closest thing I could think of would be like the broke neck Ganados from Resident Evil 4 Remake. But the difference there is it's an immediate response. It's when you put down a Ganado and then their neck snaps and you have to make a quick decision to stab a knife or shoot them more times or wait till they get up and shoot them, or maybe you don't have the time to do it. But it's really more like at that very moment you got to do something. This enemy, however, is one where the second this opportunity presents itself, there's a lot of thought process behind it. And I think it gets underappreciated, not respected enough. I'm actually kind of ashamed that this concept hasn't been used more in Resident Evil games. I really would like it to be brought back. But without further ado, the enemy that I feel like is the most criminally underrated enemy of all time in all Resident Evil is the Crimson Heads. Now, the Crimson Heads, as I said before, there's a lot of enemy types in Resident Evil, and we could be here all day talking about why this enemy is underrated, why that enemy is underrated, or why this enemy is overrated. But I think what makes the Crimson Head so unique to me personally is unlike any other enemy in any Resident Evil for that matter. I just like the concept of it. The concept of before you even fight the thing, and that's the beauty of this thing itself, is like, we always talk about the enemies, what do they do? Like, what can they do? How they go about it? How they attack you? What they look like? Etc., etc., how they go about, being a big pain in your ass. But we never really talk about or have an enemy that's like, what about having decision-making in terms of preventing its spawning? Like, preventing its birth? Like, because of certain circumstances in this game, it's not like the Crimson Head, with a few examples, which I'll mention in this video, but how do you prevent the Crimson Head from coming about? The decision-making behind that, and whether you want to do that, whether you want to use certain resources or whatever it is you need in order to prevent that. And I feel like that whole concept is something I wish could be brought back in future Resident Evil games, and I think it's something that's really underappreciated. That's why I think the Crimson Head is a truly unique enemy. But without further ado, let's get right into why I believe the Crimson Head is so underrated. The mansion is loaded with the most common of enemies, which would be the zombies. I mean, you're going to see them everywhere, and sometimes you don't have the time to get away from or avoid them. You might have to shoot them. Now, typically how it works with zombies is if you do shoot them and you are able to kill them, you get one or two results. One, you just kill them like normally, or two, you get lucky and actually can explode their head. If you explode your head, well, that's a good thing, because then you don't have to worry about the problem that I'm going to mention in terms of the zombies reanimating and come up again. But sometimes you're not so lucky to get that result. Sometimes you're going to have situations where you'll get the headshot and it may possibly explode it, or sometimes you might actually shoot them in the head or maybe the body. You're not getting the head explode, which is going to create a brand new problem in which a plethora of decisions have to be made. So, because as I said before, this zombie has a good chance of reanimating. And not just reanimating to just a zombie, but you guessed it, the Crimson Head. So, this is where the decision making begins. So, how do you get rid of this and prevent this? So, in the game, you obviously get some materials you can use to prevent this whole thing from happening. One of them will be the fuel canteen, and obviously you can resupply the fuel canteen as some of the things you can find them in save spots or outside, and the kerosene that you put in the fuel. You're also going to need a lighter to also light them on fire. So basically, once you get all the materials necessary to take care of the zombies, you just walk right up to them, set them on fire, and that's it. So you probably might be thinking, okay, where's the decision making in that? That seems pretty self-explanatory. Well, this is old school Resident Evil. This isn't, newer stuff where a lot more materials are more plentiful. You have to be mindful of how scarce your resources are. You don't have a lot of uses with the canteen with as much fuel as you can get with the kerosene. So you have to use it thoughtfully. So then you got to ask yourself the question, is it worth using it in this spot? If you have a zombie in a room, like around a safe room that you're going to be constantly going back and forth, it makes sense to set them on fire. Hence, if you have a zombie in an area which you normally don't go back and forth too often, then it probably makes sense to save those resources for something more useful. But you have all these decisions made. And that's the thing about all this, is that I think that's the beauty of it right there, of this enemy. We're talking about all these decisions you got to make before we even fight the dude itself. So you got to think whether I want to use these resources or whether I don't. Whether I want to sit there and burn them or not. Is it worth it? Are they in the right area? Do I go in this area multiple times? You have so many things you're thinking of in terms of maybe saving ammunition or saving resources or saving whatnot. But this is before the guy even spawns. And that's what makes this whole thing so interesting and unique at the same time. Now, you do have a few Crimson Head spots that spawn automatically. Like at a certain point, this guy automatically gets up and chases after you. And obviously, you have the boss fight. But eventually, if you do kill enough zombies and you don't set someone on fire and have their head explode, you're eventually going to come after a Crimson Head itself. So, what is the difference between a Crimson Head and a normal zombie? Well, they're kind of night and day, because a Crimson Head is a lot more faster, a lot more aggressive, and seemingly charges after you. And sometimes, you might get lucky. You might be able to take them down with a shot or two with a shotgun, or even possibly get a headshot with it or whatnot. But they hit pretty sporadically, and they can do some decent damage depending on the difficulty you're playing as. But the thing about it is also like the design, the red toned skin and the claws. But they're basically like a vicious zombie version of, I guess, Wolverine, just coming at you non-stop. They're just running at you. They're not slow in the slightest. And I think that leaves the whole thing of, do I really want to spawn this guy or not? Is it worth it? Is the area he's in, is it worth using the resources to prevent this guy from spawning like that if I don't take down the head? Or can I avoid that situation? And I think that's what builds the uniqueness of this whole creature. And I wish we could have bring that more in future Resident Evil titles. Just having an enemy type in which he has a chance to spawn. Do you want to take the necessary precautions to prevent them? Is it worth wasting the resources to do it? And I really wish Resident Evil would bring that whole concept back. But nonetheless, that is my opinion on Resident Evil, the Crimson Head being the most underrated Resident Evil enemy of all time. Let me know what your definition of the most underrated Resident Evil creature of all time. Why do you think it is, and what do you think makes it so underappreciated, or what we need to do to maybe put some respect towards that enemy's name? Let me know down below. But thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you guys did enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully I can see you guys back on the next video. Thanks, and I'll see you all later. Peace.